It's Sunday, July 27th, 1941. Just returned from a company briefing. We woke up, had our briefing, and ate before heading down to the bridgehead to relieve the soldiers of the 65th. We've familiarized ourselves with the terrain and studied the map. Oberst Hiller personally inspected the area and considers it the toughest position our division has defended so far. Over 4,000 dead Russians are scattered around, firmly entrenched all around the bridgehead. There are no plans to enlarge it further now. We'll have to capture their positions when we gather for the major attack, so why go to the effort now? There are more heavily entrenched Reds a few kilometers ahead anyway. In the morning, Hiller issued various rules of engagement, and I wonder what we'll encounter there. They've already taken out 7 of our tanks down there, with at least 3 more recently observed. Maybe it'll be us who finish those last 3 off, but I don't want to speculate. It's better to focus on the facts. I also prefer not to designate any crew members for the assault detachment on foot task. I'd rather handle it myself to avoid having comrades on my conscience if something goes wrong, and something is bound to happen. What's the use of assigning that task to Lorenzi, my new radio operator, if he lacks the drive when the moment arrives? Alres will act without orders if necessary. There will be no need to ask him. I'm filled with anticipation about what the next few days will bring. So today marks the 6th day we've spent on the ground of the Soviet Union. We all hope the preparations will be completed soon so we can launch our attack again. We must live day by day and avoid thinking too far ahead. It's better to get plenty of sleep and maintain steady nerves for the upcoming challenges. Yesterday, while I was seated, a mosquito bit me in the most delicate areas for the 3rd time. The mosquito plague here is unbelievable. Back home, no one can fathom what it's like here, where we instinctively swat at buzzing insects, much like horses and cattle swat flies with their tails. And then there's the dust and the heat. Although the temperature in the sun isn't 70°C, the interior of our armoured vehicles easily reaches such levels. It's not uncommon for us to spend up to 20 hours inside our vehicles, from the early hours until nightfall. When nature calls, someone else has to take over our positions. We've all experienced this. And if someone manages to save a bit of coffee, it's often shared with the crew or a thirsty infantryman. Those poor soldiers receive even less than we do. Supposedly, we'll soon have the pleasure of traversing the roads of the Soviet landscape again. I'll never forget the relentless dust. It turns us into flour millers, resembling individuals draped in flour sacks rather than black uniformed soldiers. But regardless, all will be well if we can capture Leningrad. We must take control of Leningrad. In the area of the new bridgehead, the water is said to be better. This is crucial because, until now, we've washed with something resembling liquid manure, or at best, old and stale rainwater. Yesterday evening, Rink and I went to the well to fetch some water. Resourceful individuals had dug a deep hole near the outlet, allowing us to draw clear water with a pump. Being washed down with clear, fresh water was incredibly refreshing. Just a while ago, my Unteroffizier Albert, my current driver, and Unteroffizier Förster, who recently joined me and now commands a tank, were awarded the EK2. Awards are gradually being earned as we hold the bridgehead. This small piece of ground has already witnessed a lot of bloodshed, with crosses marking the fallen soldiers. Approximately 300 German soldiers are believed to have fallen here in the bridgehead. On the other side, however, there are 4,000 dead Russians. Thankfully, the mosquito density here is much lower than in the forests where we were previously stationed. Our troops are spread out, extending up to Zagorje. I recently visited Lieutenant von Huys of the staff of Schützen Regiment 114 to organize some heavy field telephone cable. Unfortunately, we couldn't find any, because we are now in the 3-kilometer zone in front of the enemy, and only double-circuit lines are allowed here. So, we'll have to manage without a telephone. But while I was down there, I took a look at one of the bunkers, and I really liked it. I'll make sure we build one here as well because there are rumors that we'll be staying for about 14 days. These rumors travel from high command to the officers, from them to the old Feldwebel, and then to the young Unteroffiziere, who spread the information to their own crews. Latrine rumors like these spread quickly. It's always exciting to find out what's actually true. As long as we don't come under too heavy fire from the Russian artillery, it should be quite bearable here for a while. Right next to us in the valley, down a 6-meter steep sandbank, there's a little river that invites us to bathe. We plan to make use of it tomorrow. Today my platoon is on standby, as Russian reconnaissance patrols have probed across the river several times and come right up to this area. The infantry on our side isn't deployed very densely. Unteroffizier Dahlmann has just been down there to establish communication with the infantry. They have 1 platoon for every 300 meters of ground, which isn't much considering the heavily wooded terrain. On the other hand, the heavy Russian tanks won't find it easy to navigate through the swampy woodland either. After the significant casualties the Russians have suffered here, they're now adopting a defensive posture and digging in on the other side. There are rumors that they've raised 3 new armored corps in front of Petersburg, but I can't confirm if that's true. The Russian forces are clearly opponents who have been underestimated by our politicians. Anyway, I'm eagerly awaiting the outcome of the next few days. I hope the night won't be filled with too much artillery fire. Monday, July 28th, 1941, at the bridgehead. Last night, an infernal concert began precisely at midnight, when the Russians launched an attack along our eastern line. Our tracer rounds lit up the sky like fireworks on the Kaiser's birthday. Our company didn't intervene, only the heavy howitzer 200 meters to our right did. When one of those 15 centimeters barrels was fired, it made quite a racket. There were several impacts on the meadow next to the river, about 100 meters from here. I'm not sure why there haven't been any impacts in our company sector yet. The 65th wasn't hit either, with only a single shell landing here at that time. I didn't get much sleep. The midnight concert continued as the Russians pounded our eastern line with heavy artillery. The fire was so intense that it made the earth tremble. All formations are ordered to prepare to leave. Our unit will be the last armoured formation to vacate the bridgehead as the infantry takes full control. Our own riflemen have already moved out. It seems I have built my nice dugout in vain. I had brought 2 large loads of picket fencing from the village, so much that I nearly collapsed under the weight. All that digging, the calluses and blisters on our hands, all for naught. Our foxholes had become rather comfortable. Well, in the coming hours we will have to leave them. At least there's some comfort in knowing that our stay here was brief, just a one-night performance of this drama. Now, the infantry corps is catching up with us, and the advance on Leningrad will continue. The Russians here persistently engage in harassment, firing at specific times. It occurs in the mornings, and then during the early night. By the way, together with Unteroffizier Grave, I visited the church where Lieutenant Leppelmann is buried. Leppelmann had fallen at the crossroads ahead. We had planned to proceed to the dam where one of the heavy tanks that had overrun Company Marquardt is stationed. While at the church, I took photographs of the dam and the power station. It seems the Russians must have spotted us because they sent a few salvos of machine gun fire in our direction. Bullets cut through the grass just where Gras and I were standing. Due to the foggy conditions, I decided to take a photo with a longer exposure time. However, just when I had raised my head over the wall of the churchyard to line up my shot, there was another burst of bullets nearby. I had to settle for a quick snapshot before retreating. We abandoned the plan to visit the dam. After our return, we encountered Paul Terhiesen and Edu Bruggemann, who had used a motorcycle combination to reach the bridgehead, simply to find out what was happening. Together, we all headed down to the company's assembly area, where we were warmly greeted by our old comrades. Now, as it's getting dark, I must conclude for today. The remaining photographs in this book have been sourced from an album belonging to a member of one of the heavy companies of Panzer Regiment 11. 2 of these photos depict a captured Russian T-28 tank, repurposed for German service as a Beutepanzer. It is known that the T-28 was deployed by the 4th Company, the same unit in which the few identifiable individuals in the photos also served. While none of the photographs are captioned or dated, it is evident that they were taken during the initial months of Operation Barbarossa in the summer and autumn of 1941. Although it might be possible to link some of the photos to specific events and dates, I have opted not to provide captions, as in many cases, this would be stating the obvious. Instead, I have chosen to let the photographs speak for themselves. Many of them are of remarkable quality, often taken through the vision slit or from the turret of a Panzer IV, offering a valuable visual complement to Wilhelm Sander's diaries and providing a captivating perspective on the campaign from the viewpoint of a Panzerman in Panzer Regiment 11. Tuesday, July 29th, 1941, Lukavska. This morning, the company departed from the bridgehead. The infantry had taken over the positions from our riflemen yesterday evening and had immediately launched their offensive against the Russians. As our last vehicles emerged from the woods to join the road, the Russian artillery opened fire. The presence of a formidable adversary is evident from the numerous graves of our fallen comrades that line the road, particularly as we draw closer to the bridgehead. Mass graves filled with Russian soldiers are also a somber sight. Most of the trees in this area are splintered, and the many water-filled craters from shells and bombs contribute to a rather eerie atmosphere. Nevertheless, the Russians are faltering, as indicated by the reports from interrogating prisoners. Even though we may have to wait a while before launching our next attack, the primary objective is clear. We will advance once more. We are now closest to Leningrad, and this success fills us with satisfaction. As we proceed toward the bridgehead, the infantry will consolidate their positions, and together with the Queen of all arms, we will deal the final blow to the Red divisions. Until then, it's Panzer Heil and batten down the hatch. Wednesday, July 30th, 1941, Likovska. Today marks Oberleutnant Hiller's birthday. To celebrate this special occasion, I arranged everything needed for a modest birthday surprise for our commanding officer. Early in the morning, the sentries gathered a bouquet of flowers from the meadows and gardens, which Fahnenjunker Lappe would present to Hiller. Then, just before the wake-up call, the entire company gathered around Hiller's tent and serenaded him with Alte Kameraden as a birthday tribute. When we approached his tent, Hiller was still fast asleep, but the music roused him. After we finished singing, a pleasantly surprised Oberleutnant emerged from the tent, and we handed him the bouquet of wildflowers. Hiller then delivered a brief speech and expressed his gratitude to the company. All in all, it was a commendable celebration, considering the challenging circumstances we find ourselves in. The Spies, Company Sergeant Major, contributed a bottle of cognac for the boss, which was enthusiastically consumed by US administrative authorities, accompanied by a packet of biscuits and a steaming cup of coffee from the samovar. We are all gathered on the steps of the Red School. Who says we can't enjoy a few comfortable moments in the field? In between sips of cognac and sips of coffee, I had to write evaluation reports for the Fahnenjunker, who had already prepared for their journey to Paderborn, where they will join the Waffenschule in Wunsdorf. The two brothers had been quite a challenge. Rink and Aschauer were initially not the regiment's first choices, and it became my responsibility to bring them up to standard. Rink was fortunate and received last-minute approval via telephone, while only Aschauer was expected to remain here. As he had truly demonstrated his commitment during his time in our company, I personally spoke with Wiltz, Bauer, Hagemeister, and finally with the Oberst himself to ensure that the unfortunate fellow would receive his assignment, which he eventually approved. The young man was overjoyed when I delivered the news that he could proceed. Alongside Aschauer, my gunner Rink, Lappe, Henschke and Kuhlbersch, one of our drivers, were also leaving to pursue positions as reserve officer candidates. Led by Hiller, we have now arrived in Samosche. This will be our temporary station for the reinforced company. The village appears to be swarming with mosquitoes, but we are growing accustomed to them. Alongside our 5th company, there is also Oberleutnant Eggert, with 3 Panzer Eifs, and Lieutenant Spiekermann with his pioneer unit. His men have recently conducted a search for individuals over 14 years of age. The outcome: 1 man, a one-eyed hydrocephalic of approximately 30 years, and 5 elderly Rasputins, one of whom uses crutches. They all sport long beards and unkempt hair, with hardly any teeth remaining in their mouths. They gather in the village square where our tanks are located, completely unaware of the situation. I motion for the elderly men to sit down. They chuckle at my attempts to speak Russian and relax a bit. Then I inquire about the whereabouts of the partisans, which suddenly piques their interest. I suspect they misunderstood my question. They consider themselves too old for such activities, they explain, while pointing at their toothless mouths. Waterhead displays his dark red eye socket. The partisans, they inform me, are all na sluzba, in service in Leningrad. It appears that the Russians are conscripting anyone capable of wielding a weapon in Leningrad. Thursday, July 31st, 1941. Yesterday, we gathered to celebrate Hiller's birthday. By chance, Theo Langenbruch arrived in the evening with some paperwork from Glesken, and he also brought a box containing 100 half-litre bottles of beer from Riga. What a delightful surprise. Hiller secured 10 bottles for us, and we also had a bottle of cognac provided by the Spice. A large pan of fried potatoes was prepared. We all, the platoon leaders, convened in the farmer's parlour, which we had tidied up nicely for the occasion. On the table, a samovar quietly hissed, and there was excellent music playing on the radio. The potatoes were incredibly delicious, and we enjoyed plenty of them. We washed down the meal with half a litre of Riga's finest beer, which proved to be quite exceptional and could easily match our German beer. Later, we passed around the bottle of cognac, along with my schnapps glass, the only one the company possesses. We had quite an assortment of cups and mugs ready on the table, waiting to be filled with steaming hot tea. I must acquire one of those samovars for myself. They work far better than Zangenmeister's modern coffee apparatus. Hiller informed us that we will remain here for 8 days before the attack on Leningrad commences. The Oberst has confirmed this. We've noticed that these old houses, situated so close to Leningrad, exhibit more traces of culture compared to those we've encountered further to the southwest. Here, the wooden structures rest on stone foundations, and sometimes there are 2 or 3 rooms inside. These interiors often contain remnants such as photographs, linking them to a bygone era of culture before 1917. There are no discernible traces of cultural achievements from the Soviet period here. The local residents appear somewhat better dressed than those in the villages, and don't all exhibit the demeanour of the international proletariat. Many women still wear the short hairstyles that I recall seeing in Germany during communist demonstrations. In general, their clothing resembles that of Germany in 1926 to 1927. When our propaganda asserts that the Bolsheviks have proletarianized the population, reducing them to a docile herd of cattle, it appears to be accurate based on their outward appearance alone. Additionally, we've observed that the collectives and kolkhozes are either concealing their livestock or driving them northward, away from our presence. This presents a logistical challenge for us, as it means our supply units must transport substantial quantities of food, in addition to fuel and ammunition, across considerable distances. However, overall, we have no major complaints. There is an ample supply of bread and crisp bread, which is quite filling. We simply need to manage our resources carefully and forage for additional provisions when possible. It's unfortunate that the potatoes aren't yet ready for harvest. Currently, infantrymen are thoughtlessly digging up entire potato fields in search of enough to fill just a small basket. However, come winter, we will be in a position to provide sustenance to the local population. It's becoming increasingly evident that we, as soldiers, are carrying the weight of all of Europe on our shoulders. Friday, 1st August, 1941. We woke up as usual, went through our morning routine, had breakfast, and then gathered together. Letters from home were distributed. I received mine yesterday evening and read them by the dim light of a small candle before bedtime. Now, as I'm writing here, my driver is testing our new brakes right in front of me. We've just had new brake pads installed, and he's driving back and forth with a roaring engine, causing a considerable distraction. Soot particles from the exhaust are drifting down onto the paper, but I'm more than willing to tolerate it as long as our old vehicle can still carry us to Leningrad, our strategic objective. Hiller is currently in Lososkina, working to educate the men about the situation. Bongart and I were sitting in the adjoining room with a map hanging in the doorway. So, what do you think our strategic objectives are here in the east? We stand behind the map, our heads poking out to the left and right, and we gaze into the blank expressions of the soldiers in front of us. They remain silent, looking at us with wide eyes. Hiller loses patience and shouts, "The Volga River! The Volga!" Someone asks in disbelief. No one seems to want to accept it. Another soldier comments, "With our old vehicles, we'll be lucky if we reach Leningrad. That might be the end of the road for us." Back when we were in constant battle, these same soldiers would have laughed and responded, "Consider it done, and then on to the Urals, if necessary." But now, with too much rest and idleness, they grow dissatisfied, become professionally tired, stir up trouble, and whisper mutinously to one another. It's an age-old truth. Too much rest tends to discontent the troops. Even Oswald is beginning to waver. Ever since the day he disabled the tank with the petrol can, he feels cheated of the Knight's Cross. Now he only wants a transfer back to the replacement section. Opetz is even more adamant. Having been targeted twice by anti-tank guns, he refuses to get inside a tank anymore. His nerves can't handle it, he says. I won't even mention Bartnek, who's proving to be a coward. He certainly won't be earning his Iron Cross First Class in the 5th Company. But Oswald and Opeth's change in attitude has left me disheartened. Now that they both have the Eco 1 and no other immediate prospects, they suddenly start avoiding their duties. Matusek is a far better man. He had already earned this high award in France, and continues to give his best here. Oris is also holding up well. The only thing he complains about is the food, even though he has the largest belly among us. But apart from that, he still goes at it with determination. The only reason why even proven men behave this way is that they have nothing else to do. They gather, share beer, and one word leads to another. If only we were back home. Poor Schramm will never return home. He's buried at Zvegiai, like so many others. It's just a matter of time until we meet the same fate. And just like that, morale plummets, and doubt sets in. And because they've slept through the day without fighting, they can't sleep at night and begin telling unsettling tales, further wearing each other down. It's frustrating. Next week, we'll be back in action, which should dispel this miserable mood. Today, I witnessed a local family reunion. The house on the corner, next to our tank at the village's exit, is inhabited by several women with many little children. The old woman who lives there showed us the village well yesterday. Her son-in-law returned a short while ago, bringing immense joy to the women. One of our patrols had found him several kilometers away. He claimed to come from Leningrad, where he worked, and that he was trying to reach Samoshia. After an interrogation, someone provided him with a handwritten passport, which he carefully folded into a piece of old newspaper. Armed with this document, he arrived here in the sidecar of one of our dispatch riders' motorcycles. There was so much kissing, tears, and hugging. I also interrogated him to the best of my ability and informed him that he must go to the church to spend the night. I warned him that failure to comply would result in his being shot and that his family would be arrested if he attempted to flee. He agreed and then disappeared into the house with the women. With my limited knowledge of the Russian language, I often find myself acting as a translator. When some soldiers steal a cow from a woman's barn and she comes to complain, it's me who has to tell her to go away. I was the one who had to instruct all the elderly Rasputins in the village to spend the night at the church. I have to ask people about the directions of the roads and the location of water sources. Over time, this has become more effective as I consistently use the same phrases. The challenge arises when the Russians start speaking rapidly and suddenly I can't understand a word. At such times, I resort to using hand gestures, much like Robinson communicating with cannibals. However, I do plan to continue studying this language after the war. Sunday, 2nd August 1941. The morning has passed once again. These days seem to blend together, each one resembling the other. The only one experiencing something different every day is our driver, who continually deals with various repairs on the vehicle. Just as commanders define their days by the actions that occurred, drivers describe their days based on the damages they had to fix. For example, the day I refer to as the one when Oswald took out the big tank at Zvegiai, my driver remembers as the day when my camouflage headlight was shot away. We've stopped keeping track of the days and recording every village or town we pass. We only take note of significant events. And for us old Skoda drivers, those events are usually linked to the ever-growing problems with our Skoda Supersports. I hope we can get rid of these old vehicles soon. I'm truly impressed by the hard and skilled work our maintenance and repair teams perform. The old Skodas in particular demand a considerable amount of attention, and in terms of vehicle reliability, we outshine other divisions. We've settled into the house next to our tank, having cleaned it thoroughly. I've rigged up an improvised lamp, allowing me to continue writing in here, somewhat shielded from the swarms of midges outside. I've crafted a lampshade from a bulbous glass bottle by shaping it with a horseshoe, a skill I've learned in the army. To replace Rink, my wireless operator who has been transferred to the War Academy in Winsdorf, and Lorenzi, the unreliable one, I've received 2 new crew members for my team. My new wireless operator is Mashäuser, the same guy who was in the trench with me at Jamkino when we got surrounded by Russians. The guy seems to have no fear and generally knows what needs to be done. He's also a trained gunner, which is a valuable asset. Busman is my new loader. He appears to be a calm and collected fellow. He's seen action only once so far, so he's still somewhat inexperienced, but I'm sure that will change quickly now that he's with us. Both of them are from Westphalia, which suits me just fine. I've never been particularly fond of Rhinelanders, except for a few like Willy Esser, the tank driver. Rhinelanders tend to talk too much and often fail to act correctly when the situation demands it. And of course, there's even more talk afterward. The same goes for the Saxons, in stark contrast to the reserved Silesians. In the army, you learn to judge people quickly. Now, here's a different story about a Rhinelander. A few weeks ago, Schallenberg, an Obergefreiter with 4 years of service, was assigned to drive a Büssing lorry loaded with petrol cans. But he doesn't drive in the conventional sense. He doesn't take care of the vehicle or maintain it properly. Instead, he uses it for reckless racing. Someone, in their infinite wisdom, decided to entrust our best and heaviest lorry to this lunatic. Schallenberg proceeded to race down a road flanked by deep ditches, a common sight in the Soviet Union, on both sides. He attempted to overtake a car and just barely squeezed past it. Unfortunately, he failed to notice that the car he was overtaking belonged to the regimental commander. Even worse, he failed to spot a pile of stones a few hundred meters ahead on the left side of the road. In full view of the commander, he rammed his lorry into and over the stone pile, rupturing the oil sump before ending up in the ditch. The commander didn't hold back and gave Schallenberg the reprimand of his life, eventually ordering him to be detained for 10 days. The punishment was publicly announced in front of the entire company, but Schallenberg was notably absent during and after the ceremony. It seemed he had vanished. We later learned that he had been reassigned to Germany, tasked with hauling stones for the organization Tot. Our finest and heaviest supply lorry was now rendered useless and would be out of commission for an indefinite period. Then, about 10 days later, while we were in the Russian bridgehead, a large lorry came speeding down the road. It screeched to a halt right in front of the company headquarters, blaring its compression pipe loudly. The driver, of course, turned out to be none other than Schallenberg. He leaped out of the cabin and made his report to the Spies, who had just arrived with the field kitchens. "Schallenberg, do you know what's waiting for you?" asked the Spies. In his thick Cologne accent, Schallenberg replied, "Yes, you surely have a pile of letters for me." However, upon hearing that he was facing 10 days of detention, Schallenberg appeared crestfallen. "Me? What? Never. And if I have to personally speak to the OKH," he declared defiantly. He then proceeded to regale us with his adventure. While in Königsberg, he managed to obtain permission to acquire a new oil sump from the replacement vehicle depot to replace the one he had wrecked. But to his disappointment, they didn't have one available for him there. Instead, they directed him to Braunschweig, where he was told he could find the necessary part. Schallenberg received permission and train tickets and set off for the Büssing company in Braunschweig. However, upon his arrival, he discovered that the company was closed for the night. So, he spent the evening at the local inns of the city and returned the next morning, only to find out that there was no oil sump available for the heavy lorry there either. Schallenberg's reaction was nothing short of explosive, displaying the theatrics only a true Rhinelander from Cologne could muster. He insisted there was a lorry full of tank ammunition waiting at the front, emphasizing that he had been given an order to secure a replacement part at any cost, even if it meant taking it from a brand new vehicle. The director of the company was drawn into the commotion and personally assured Schallenberg that a custom-made replacement would be available for him the following day. True to his word, a shiny new oil sump, complete with all its necessary fittings, awaited Schallenberg the next day. The parcel was meticulously prepared, and express delivery paperwork was arranged for it. Schallenberg, feeling that such a prioritized package warranted his own priority, opted for a second-class wagon on his return journey. There, he struck up a conversation with a Luftwaffe lieutenant who listened with great interest to Schallenberg's tales of adventure and his quest for an oil sump. The lieutenant asked where Schallenberg needed to go next, to which Schallenberg replied that he was headed to Rossitten. In an extraordinary turn of events, the lieutenant agreed to fly Schallenberg and the oil sump from Königsberg to Rossitten aboard a Junkers 52. After a 2-hour wait in Königsberg, the big aircraft arrived, marking Schallenberg's first ever flight. Given the urgency of Operation Oil Sump, the lieutenant arranged for a car upon landing, swiftly transporting Schallenberg and his precious cargo to Repair Shop 2 in Pskov. Within an hour, the substantial bussing lorry was repaired and ready for action. With the mission accomplished, Schallenberg proudly returned only to discover that his brief sojourn in Germany had been extended by 10 days of detention in Russia. Poor guy indeed. Sunday, August 3rd, 1941. Another day, much like the one before. I slept in, enjoyed plenty of coffee, and wrote a few letters home. We had a platoon leader meeting, during which Winscher and Oswald acted up again. One member of my crew is in the woods helping build a new latrine. I managed to give my uniform a quick brush. As I sit here, I can hear Eggert loudly boasting about his supposed heroic deeds. What an insufferable braggart he is. It seems that when he needs to be brave, all his vehicles mysteriously get stuck in a swamp, as happened when we were at Hill 98, near the railway line behind Karamishewo. I'm feeling tired once more. I think I'll catch some more sleep. I was awakened by Bongart, who asked if I wanted to go for a swim. Well, of course. So I quickly ran my fingers through my hair, put on my cap and jacket, made sure I had my pistol, grabbed a Russian towel, and hopped into the car. Spiekermann didn't want to join us. He suspected that Glesken might arrive today. No matter, we decided to go without him. Eggert joined us. We drove through the woods on the outskirts of the village, crossed a small bridge over a stream, and headed down a dusty road. I initially thought we were going to the nearby small lake, where our regimental staff is located. However, Bongart and Eggert had other plans. They wanted to go to Sarushtia. What a ridiculous idea. I was up for a swim, but not if it meant driving 50 kilometers to where Abteilung, was stationed, just for a quick dip in the water before the 50-kilometer return journey along the less-than-ideal Russian roads. We passed an airfield with deep bomb craters and the smouldering remains of houses, signs of active Russian aerial activity. 2 hours later, we finally arrived at our destination. My legs felt numb, and my back was sore. On a positive note, we learned that Abteilung had received our mail, and, even better, Eggers had brought a nice pack of North State cigarettes. What a pleasant surprise. We made our way to the water and found out that Glesken wouldn't be seeing Spiekermann today, as he was at the lake taking a swim. Ozero Dolgoje Lake stretches about 6 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide. I must admit that the beautiful scenery and the crystal-clear water more than made up for the arduous journey. The lake had a lovely sandy beach, and the shoreline sloped gently into the water before suddenly plunging to a depth of about 10 meters. Using German and Russian tent squaws, several soldiers had ingeniously transformed local fishing boats into sailing yachts, shuttling back and forth between the banks. There was a leisurely flow of boat traffic on the water. Some makeshift rafts, crafted from roof beams and often equipped with sails, had been pressed into naval service. A few of the more privileged pioneers even had 2 proper German rubber paddle boats, which they used to zip across the lake. It was a wonderful place that could momentarily make one forget that we were in the midst of a war. I couldn't help but fantasize about having a vacation home by a lake like this. It was almost unbelievable that Russia could offer such beautiful spots, especially considering all the hardships we had endured. The lake was teeming with soldiers, swimming and filling the beaches with laughter. A bit further down the shore, a group of men from our reconnaissance platoon basked in the sun, resembling a colony of sunbathing penguins. Here, of course, we swam in the nude, so our posteriors, which hadn't seen the sun since Freistadt, gleamed as bright as the sun itself, while the rest of our skin had turned a deep brown from exposure. I ran into many old acquaintances, and after our refreshing swim, we all sat in the sun to dry off. Kessler from the 1st Platoon kindly provided Eggert and me with delicious fish sandwiches. Later, another comrade brought us hot tea along with crisp bread and honey, and it tasted so good that we ended up devouring most of Glesken's crisp bread supply. Following that, we drove back, getting stuck in long columns of heavy supply lorries for a considerable amount of time. When we finally returned to Samoshia, we were covered in so much dirt and dust that we had to wash ourselves once again. After reading the letters we had brought back with us, I volunteered to prepare fried potatoes for the evening meal. By personally flipping them, I ensured that none turned into charcoal. Everyone agreed that my fried potatoes were the best, which made me quite proud. However, later in the tent, we realized that we had consumed too many onions in the past few days. Just now, my petroleum lamp accidentally toppled over, shattering the glass cylinder. I'll need to get some candles tomorrow. Wednesday, August 6th, 1941. We are still in the idyllic woodland village of Samoshier. It feels like I'm a guest at a Soviet spa. Besides a few aircraft and distant artillery booms, there are hardly any signs of war here. Our infantry is moving closer, and the artillery is in position. All that remains is for the Finns to link up with our eastern flank, and then we can strike decisively in the centre. I don't have much to report on the overall situation, but it doesn't look too bleak for us, unlike the Russians. Recently, the numbers of Russian tanks and heavy weapons destroyed by Army Corps and our division were published, and we take pride in our accomplishments. Today, Hauptmann Farah arrived. He is supposed to stay with our reinforced company, but he's an odd character. He overheard me talking about him, but I don't particularly care. He ordered a vehicle inspection for the company troop and my platoon, which is a good idea. Even the best drivers can sometimes overlook small problems. The drivers in my platoon are all skilled, and my own chauffeur, Benno Albert, is the best among them. Spilken, the red-haired troublemaker, is also highly capable. Initially, I thought he might have been an old communist or SPD supporter, but it turns out he was an old Hitler youth fighter. He will likely be promoted to Unteroffizier soon. I hear intense gunfire coming from the direction of the airfield, but it's challenging to discern the exact nature of the situation there. This seems to be a daily occurrence. Just now, I heard some of our Messerschmitts flying overhead. They produce a high-pitched, whistling, jingling sound. In contrast, the Russian aircraft emit a muffled buzzing, gurgling noise. Their Ratas have a squat, thick appearance, while our Messerschmitts are slender with a longer wingspan and greater speed. The Russians also have a type of aircraft that resembles our Ju-88s, but its cockpit protrudes farther than the two engines in the wings, similar to how the middle finger is longer than the index and ring finger. Differentiating their bomber types can be quite challenging. By now, not many enemy aircraft fly over our position, even though there are 8 sizable airfields around Leningrad. During the morning hours, it's mostly our fighters and bombers heading towards the Russians. This morning, I was awakened by the sight of a closed formation of our bombers, totaling 26 aircraft, heading northward. In those moments when we witness our Luftwaffe in action, our feelings resemble those of infantrymen when they see us, the tankers, going into battle. They cheer, laugh, and excitedly wave their hands. When we tanker crew members witness our own aircraft in action, we share the same sense of exhilaration. However, they cannot hear our shouts or see our gestures of appreciation. Yesterday evening, we enjoyed a feast fit for kings. Enns had slaughtered a cow, and the meat was distributed among the crews. Late into the night, the village was filled with the delightful aroma of frying, stewing, and cooking. But before this culinary delight, a typical incident occurred. A member of the supply train, taking advantage of a moment when Enns was distracted, cut the tongue from the momentarily unguarded cow's head. It always seems to be the same individuals engaging in such antics. It must have been Bartnek. Indeed, when it was announced that the meat distribution would not proceed until the tongue was returned, Bartnek was found standing in the exact spot where, 10 minutes later, the missing tongue reappeared in a bucket. These acts of disloyalty among comrades are disheartening. As a side dish, we had boiled potatoes with peas, skillfully prepared by Maschhauser and Unteroffizier Albert, complete with extra gravy for everyone. Baumann and I were in charge of organizing the peas. The local farmers have several large fields filled with peas. It was a tedious task to sift through them all and pick out the ones riddled with worms, but I knew how to do it. After all, I always had to assist my mother with such chores. I can take care of myself. There's no need for me to get married. Today, we'll be having peas again, this time accompanied by fried potatoes since all the meat has been consumed. But that will be quite enjoyable too. Other than these rather mundane details, there's nothing new to report. Glesken paid a visit yesterday and brought a sizable stack of cigarettes organized by Ritgen in Riga. As a non-smoker like myself, it didn't particularly excite me. I do wonder what we'll be able to extract from Leningrad once it's been cleared. It won't be much longer now. Thursday, 7th August, 1941. Samoshier. There's a platoon leader meeting with Hiller scheduled shortly. Earlier, I visited some old comrades at the regiment. Robert Glaser wasn't there. Only Neidkowski and Bays were present with their vehicles, along with Klusener, the youngster. The regiment, led by Cole and his staff, is situated in a former cloister that now functions as a hospital near the Samro Lake. We explored the church, which still contained beautifully furnished images of saints and a wooden altar. Stacks of clergy chasubles were also in the church. Hauptmann Farah and I then climbed up the spire, providing us with a fantastic view of the lake. For a moment, we both felt like schoolboys on a sightseeing tour. We have 1 hour left until we march out. The mood is excellent, and everyone is eagerly anticipating tomorrow, when we will finally advance on Leningrad, Lososkina. Our company is currently waiting at the crossroads where Tamshik was wounded, and the 9 artillerymen were killed by bombs. And indeed, it's getting busy already. The Russians seem to be interested in scouting our assembly. Finally, things are kicking off again, and we're grateful for that. No more endless waiting. Here at the crossroads, we're awaiting the artillery section with its Nebelwerfer, to which we've been attached today. I remember when we witnessed their rockets detonating at Raseiniai, how they soared past us towards the Dubisa. Many of us threw ourselves to the ground, our knees trembling, and it was an eerie feeling as we watched the detonation clouds rising ahead. I hope I can witness that spectacle again today. Currently, the flyers are busy once more. A Russian bomber flew over the airfield and came under heavy and well-aimed flak fire. Unfortunately, it didn't go down. We've learned that Russian aircraft are well-armoured and don't go down easily. 2 of our fighters pursued it, and down here, everyone climbed out of their vehicles to watch the spectacle through binoculars, cheering and even placing bets. However, the 3 aircraft soon disappeared from view. It was a shame, but we all had to hurry back into our tanks because flak splinters were falling right where we were standing, and it's not pleasant to have one of those hit your head. The Russians in this area have begun harvesting rye. Yesterday there was quite a commotion when a group of elderly women approached us while we were sunbathing and started talking about sickles, scythes, rye, and harvesting. It took me a while to understand that they were asking for permission to go to an uninhabited house near the village to retrieve some sickles for the rye harvest. The women explained that they were too old and frail to use a scythe, and the crop-cutting machine had broken down. After the war, I intend to study this language properly. 7 Friday, 8th of August 1941, in front of the Luga Bridge. The attack has been underway for 2 hours now. Our artillery barrage commenced, coinciding with our infantry's assault. We stand approximately 1 kilometre away in a forest clearing, guarding one of our Nebelwerfer batteries. During the night, our rifle companies were withdrawn from their positions along the riverbank to join the attack. Presently, we're essentially taking their place, ensuring that any Russian elements potentially pushed across the Luga River by our offensive don't seize the valuable Nebelwerfers. For now, our own fire has ceased, but Russian long-range artillery is sending shells toward the Luga Bridge. These shells land roughly 500 to 800 meters ahead of us, with calibers of 15 and 21 centimeters. It seems the heavy shells are meant to keep us pinned down, at least that's my assumption. It's frustrating. I can't establish contact with anyone, and I'm eager to know what's happening up ahead and how the infantry's attack is progressing. The intensity of the enemy fire is staggering. I wonder if the large bridge has survived the bombardment, and if not, can we still use the smaller one? It makes me question why we didn't neutralize their heavy artillery batteries first, especially when our aircraft are consistently active in the area. However, the Luftwaffe might currently be engaged near Kingisepp and Weimar, attacking the railway line there. We can hear the shells' eerie whistling before they strike around the bridge, and the distinct reports of the Russian guns are unmistakable. There is a sound ranging section here as well, equipped with valuable gear. We're tasked with guarding those personnel too. Presently, our artillery has resumed firing. I've also picked up the sound of machine gun fire ahead, suggesting that our infantry hasn't advanced too far yet. I doubt anything will come our way, except for their artillery fire, which, thankfully, hasn't landed too close so far. This is somewhat unexpected because the rocket projectiles from the Nebelwerfer battery leave long smoke trails in the sky, usually making their position quite evident. However, the heavy rain pouring down seems to be pushing the smoke back down, effectively concealing the Nebelwerfer's location from the Russian artillery observers on the other side. In contrast, we simply need to adhere to our scheduled fire plans. Down at Bolshoi-Sabsk, where 1 Panzer division is attacking, there's a significant rumble, likely due to their larger artillery presence. Whoosh! That was a close one. If, after the war, they ever need someone to mimic the sounds of howling shells in movies, I'll volunteer. I've become quite adept at distinguishing those sounds since Jamkino. I can tell when they're too close or too far away. I've just been informed that the Nebelwerfer is about to fire another salvo, which means another 108 rockets. That spectacle didn't last for more than 2 or 3 minutes. Actually, it didn't even last that long. Fortunately, the heavy rain is on our side. The Nebelwerfer crew is removing the camouflage from their launchers again, suggesting that the fiery show is going to repeat itself a third time. I'm starting to wonder how long it'll take before the Russians pinpoint our location. I really don't want to witness those large Russian shells landing here. The weather is absolutely miserable, with rainfall so dense that I'm relieved we're not leading the attack. There's no chance to see or aim through our optics in this monsoon. Plus, I'm feeling tired since I hardly slept during the night. We only arrived here because there was simply no way to move forward on the vehicle-clogged roads. Horse-drawn vehicles surrounded us on both sides, causing quite a traffic jam. Frankly, I've had enough of this. I must admit, I'm in a bad mood today, but a bit of venting should be allowed. Now it's lunchtime, and Enz has commendably arrived with the field kitchen. He's distributing food without minding the artillery fire. Sadly, the infantry at the front doesn't have that luxury today. I'm genuinely curious about how far they've advanced by now. I can still hear sporadic machine pistol and machine gun fire, or so I think. I might be mistaken, though. Perhaps Hiller knows. But first, I'm going to eat. It feels a bit strange. The fire has moved further north, and here we are, still sitting in the same spot, knowing that the great offensive on Leningrad has begun. This will undoubtedly be a day for the history books, and it's disheartening not to be on the front line. The men share the same sense of frustration. "Herr Leutnant, when are we moving out?" they ask. "Herr Leutnant, shouldn't we be leading the way for the next 50 kilometers now?" It's enough to bring one to tears. Feldwebel Funk, the leader of the tank mechanics, has arrived to inspect my tank. The engine is losing oil, 6 liters just yesterday. I sincerely hope my trusty old tank won't give out on me. Funk also mentioned that the infantry has advanced about 6 kilometers. All I can ascertain from here is that the heavy Russian guns are still firing. If the infantry had advanced more than 10 kilometers, those guns would likely be on the run by now. It's still unclear what's happening on the front lines. Saturday, 9th August 1941, at the Luga. I'm quite shaken at the moment. Our offensive has come to a halt under heavy Russian fire at Jurki. The 1 Infantry Division has managed to advance approximately 6 kilometers toward Kingisepp. These are the outcomes of 2 days of intense fighting. For us, it means that we've only moved 500 to 600 meters beyond our starting point. It's disheartening to see the lack of progress. Even with tanks, 6. Panzer Division is finding it nearly impossible to advance due to the deep anti-tank ditches and mine barriers set by the Russians. Just in front of the initial Russian positions on the road, our men have uncovered over 80 mines. Hoffmeyer's company suffered the loss of 2 tanks, with 1 crew member dead and 6 wounded. Our own company has 3 wounded soldiers. One of the Luga bridges has sustained significant damage and can now only accommodate cars and motorbikes. It's also sagging between the piers. The other bridge suffered minor damage. Kradschützen 6, with 2 companies deployed at the front, had 12 casualties, including fatalities and numerous wounded. Schützen 4 has also incurred significant casualties. At this point, I remain skeptical about the rumours that suggest they've suffered 30% casualties. Sunday, 10th August 1941, on the Luga. We are currently heading down to the banks of the Luga. The Nebelwerfer units are relocating, and my platoon is still responsible for their protection. I'm concerned that we might come under artillery fire down there, as it's well within the range of Russian mortars. We are now passing through a forest that has been heavily damaged by Russian artillery. Earlier, I went down to the Luga to assess the situation. It's clear that we'll need to dig in once we arrive there. The weather is pleasant at the moment, and the aircraft are taking full advantage of it. I witnessed a Messerschmitt returning from pursuing a pair of Russian bombers, trailing thick smoke. As it flew over us, its cockpit canopy unexpectedly detached and fell to the ground. However, it seems the aircraft continued to function without any further issues. The Nebelwerfer units are already on the move, and our tanks will follow once they've cleared the way. If we were to lead, Our tracks would render the already precarious road impassable for their light vehicles. My driver, Unteroffizier Albert, seems to have caught a cold or something similar, likely due to the wet weather. He can't pinpoint exactly what's wrong, but he complains of discomfort in his bones, stomach issues, and a nauseous feeling. I can't tell if he's feigning illness or not. I really hope he doesn't come up with a story about nerves, like Opetz and others did. That would truly test my patience. Unteroffizier Eich from the light platoon, who was recently decorated, has suddenly claimed that the intestinal ulcer that troubled him in France has returned. I can't tolerate people like that. The Nebelwerfer launchers were supposed to fire again. If they maintain their current pace, there's no way they can fire another salvo today. Just moments ago, a squadron of our bombers flew over, consisting of Junkers 88 and Heinkel 111 aircraft, totaling 15 in all. We wish them the best of luck. Baumann mentioned that they have the potential to inflict significant damage. Well, let's hope they do. Hiller informed me that a tank from the 1st Company has been knocked out, a direct hit from a Russian bomb. Its shattered remains now litter a field near the 2nd Luger Bridge, and 2 men lost their lives. War certainly doesn't offer any life insurance. The Red Army is putting up strong resistance here.